Hi everyone, welcome to MUS119, Elements of Music. My name is Kevin Zhao and I will be the instructor of this course for this semester. I'm very happy to meet you all in this asynchronous setting. This is actually the first time for me to be teaching a class asynchronously. So I'm very excited and I think we'll still have some kind of opportunity to meet online during office hours. So I'm looking forward to that. Um, well, first, let's start with the question: what is music? So, music can be very simply defined as organized sound. And music, or sound in this case, organized sound, usually has two key elements. And number one, it's pitch, and number two, that's rhythm. So, let's start with pitch. The scientific word for pitch is frequency. But basically, pitch can be thought of as a sound that's very high or very low. For example, when you hear a baby cry, that's we'll say that that's a very high pitch. Or if you hear like the rumbling noise of the train, that usually tend to be lower in nature in terms of pitch or frequency. Um, and when an object vibrates, it vibrates back and forth at a certain speed. When the speed is fast, the pitch is high. When the speed is slow, the pitch is low. So as you can see in this slide, when it's low frequency, like here, you see that the waves are moving um, slowly. And when it's high frequency, you see that the waves are a lot more closer to each other and it just vibrates a lot faster. So that's basically pitch. On the piano, a low pitch would sound like this. And a high pitch would be something like that. Okay? So next, we have rhythm. And rhythm has to do with how the sound is organized, and we usually think of it as patterns. So music unfolds over time. It is a temporal art form. If you think about music, it's actually um, quite cool compared to other forms of art. For example, if you have um, an artist paint a painting, um, you know, from the time of just from the very beginning of creating the painting, you would have nothing. We just have a blank canvas, and then you would start painting and painting and painting. When it's completed, it kind of stays in that same state for a long, long, long time. But music, if we're mainly talking about making music live, it only exists for that duration of time when it's being performed by musicians. So there is a huge element of time. I would say it's 100% time when we are talking about music, right? So music unfolds over time. It is a temporal art form, and rhythm is the part that governs the time aspect of music. As a definition, you could think of rhythm as the pattern of sounds and silences in music and how they fit together in time. So, if you hear a pattern like this, so we could say, oh, it has a very light-hearted and happy kind of rhythm, right? And you could clap along with that. You could think of it as, right? So it doesn't really depend on the pitch, like how low or high, it sounds. It's just this way of organizing the sound in terms of patterns. But of course, we could also have other kinds of patterns like. Right, this one is a lot slower compared to the last one. And also in terms of mood, it's different. It's more calm and it's more regular, right? Da 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 da. So that's another kind of rhythm. And how you would usually hear it practically is that you will hear, a singer singing something, and then there is the guitar or the drums giving you the underlying rhythm in the song. So that's rhythm. And a note on this course, we'll be learning the laws and patterns of music coming mostly from Western classical music tradition. Um, I'm not going to limit this course to just the Western classical music. There is a lot of pop music that can be good examples for our understanding of the elements of music. So I will try to incorporate different elements, um, but mainly we will gear towards the Western classical music tradition. All right, so back to pitch. So pitch is basically how low or high a sound is, right? And in music, there are actually 12 distinct pitches or notes. And we'll get to that soon. But then there are also the repeating letter names, basically from A to G. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And how that would sound on the piano would be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right? And then it will just continue. Da 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 da. If you've been to, if you've been in choir or if you've been in any kind of musical training where you use something called solfege to sing, you would replace these with la ti do re mi fa sol. So quite interesting. And music, going forward in this course, we are we're mainly just going to use these 7 letters. Okay, so if you tend to forget your alphabets, maybe it's time to review. You can go through these. It will help with your English as well. Okay, so next we have the piano. Okay, it's a lot of keys, especially if you've never played an instrument before. This could look a little intimidating, but trust me, it will be fine. It's actually quite easy to understand. So if you look at the slide in front of you, we have 88 keys on the piano. And in this case, as we just talked about, music starts with, A, and then, it goes on until G. So in this case, you will see that the first, oh, sorry, the very first, one second. Yep. So the very first note on the piano right here, this is A, and then from here we go on and get to B, C, D, E, F, G. And then it repeats A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, and so on. And the first thing you would need to know is how can you understand this piano keyboard layout, right? So it's actually quite simple. What you have to do is to find groups of 2 black keys, like here. 2 black keys, 2 black keys, because the other group is 3 black keys, like so. So if you know just one note from that A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then you can find the rest of the notes on the piano, right? So what you want to do is to find any group of 2 black keys, and then you go to the left side, and that's the white key on the left of the 2 black keys. So in this case, we found the group of 2 black keys, and then here, right here, that's C. So you can find the other notes surrounding it, right? So just as an exercise, I'll go back to this, and maybe you can find a C somewhere here. There are multiple C's, but try it. I mean, it's already written out, so it's not that hard. But what you have to know is just remember, you want to find the group of 2 black keys, and then it's the white key on the left. Okay, that's the C. And another thing that's important for you to know is the middle C. Well, we have so many C's on the piano, and it's very helpful to kind of have that one C that you can always refer back to. That's the center of the keyboard. And that's what we call as middle C. And in this case, um, it's also known as C4. And C4 basically just means it's here's the first C, second C, third C, that's a fourth C. Okay, so in a sense, this is C1, C2, C3, and C4. And it would sound like this on the piano. Okay, that's the middle C. The first C, the lowest C down here, is really low, and then the higher one, and then a higher one, and middle C. Okay, so now moving on, we're going to get into what's called the staff. Okay, so you probably have seen this before, even if you've never played music before. Um, that's basically 5 lines and 4 spaces, right? We have 5 lines. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and then we have these spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, when you see this, know that that's basically the most fundamental element of um, music notation. Okay, so 5 lines, 4 spaces. That's called the staff. And that's where we will actually put in the notes so that when you read it, you can go back to the piano and play it. So that's the staff. And the next thing is called clefs. And we're going to use the staff and clefs together. And there are 3 types of clefs. And that's number 1, treble clef, also known as the G clef. There's bass clef, also known as the F clef. And then the C clef. Okay, so 3 types of clefs that you need to know and memorize. So let's start with treble clef. Treble clef is the higher clef, and this clef is used for instruments that are higher in nature, like the violin. Um, and there are also many other instruments that use the treble clef, like if you look at instruments in the orchestra, violin definitely, and then like flute, clarinet, just so many instruments. Treble clef, that's a higher clef. It's also called the G clef. So when you look at the slide, okay, we just put all of these notes here and kind of think about how notes are put on the staff. You can see there's this very first note here. Well, maybe we can start from this note. That has a little arrow on it, right? So this note right here is G. And from here, this is on the line. This is on the line. The next note up is going to be in the space. So imagine you're playing some kind of computer game where, if you press up, it kind of just jumps to the next position. And in this case, it jumps from line to space. And from space, the next one is going to be line. Okay? So if you know that this is a G, the next one is going to be A, B, and then C, D. So it just kind of loops, right? So this is the treble clef, and what you need to know is that the treble clef is also called the G clef because when you draw the treble clef, we actually start right here, okay, on this line. We start here, and then let me just trace this, and then you just go up and down. It's very helpful if you practice how to draw this. Maybe I can draw it separately here so that it looks a little clearer in some sense. Okay, that's how I would draw the treble clef, and you should always start from the second line. And it's called a G clef because right here on the second line, that's a G. Okay, so if you know that that's G, if you know that that's G, if there's another note up here, this is G, this would be A. If you go up, that would be B. If you go up, that would be C. And then the same thing going down. Okay, so that's the treble clef. And what you need to know is where the middle C is. So earlier, remember, middle C is C4. That's the fourth C from the lowest C on the piano. And in treble clef, that C is actually right here. Okay, so it's not really even within the staff. So that's why we have this tiny little line called a ledger line, and that's how we notate notes that cannot fall within the staff. Okay, moving on. There is a very easy way to remember the notes on these clefs. So for treble clef, I always imagine a little boy smiling, okay? Because the notes on the lines are E, G, B, D, F. Well, we definitely already know the G, right? That's the note that corresponds to the G clef, hence its name, G. And the other notes are E, G, B, D, F. Of course, the notes in between, it's just the notes in order. So E, F, G, A, B, B, then C, and then D, and then E and F. But in this case, we're going to just memorize them separately. So we're going to look at just the line notes and then the space notes. And in this case, we have E, G, B, D, F. And there is this mnemonic device to help us remember, and that's every good boy does fine on this side. Okay. And for the space notes, it's very easy. It's face, F-A-C-E, face. That's why I like to draw a little boy with a happy face. Okay, so once again, every good boy does fine for line notes, and F-A-C-E, face for space notes. And now we're going to look at the bass clef. The bass clef is used for lower instruments like the cello, or any other instruments in the orchestra, like the bassoon, the cello, double bass. There's so many instruments that use the bass clef, and the bass clef looks like an ear. Um, well, that's just my interpretation, but it's doesn't look like an ear to me. So here's the bass clef, and then it starts from this line, and then you would draw this way, and then there are these two dots. So the bass clef is also known as the F clef because, oh, sorry. It's also known as the F clef because where we start drawing the bass clef, like right here, that's an F. Okay, so if you know F, if F is right here, if you draw another note up, that would be G, and another note up, that would be A, and then B. Okay, and if you go from F to another note down, that would be E. Another note down, that would be D. Another note down, that would be C. So basically, if you know your alphabets, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you'll be able to figure it out. Okay, so that's the bass clef, and you should always know where the middle C is, and then we'll get to that in the next slide actually. So in bass clef, we can also use this really cool mnemonic device. And bass clef, to me, this is more associated with animals. Okay, just to make it easy for you to remember. So bass clef, the line notes are going to be G, B, D, F, A, and that is great big dog fights animals. Okay, so that's the line notes, and space notes is A, C, E, G, and you can remember it by all cows eat grass. Okay, so that's bass clef. Try to remember these very, very clearly because going on, you have to have these memorized. So once again, bass clef, line notes, great big dog fights animals, and space notes, all cows eat grass. So here is what's called the grand staff. If you've ever seen a grand piano, okay, the word grand basically just means that, hey, this instrument can cover, all of these 88 keys, right? Both treble clef and bass clef. So I don't think that's where the name actually comes from, like for grand piano, but I like to just associate them that way, so that when you see the grand staff, which is basically the treble clef and the bass clef used together, because now it covers like a much wider span of sounds, right? So this is called a grand staff when you see these two together, and this is used for the piano. And you see right here in the middle, we have these little line, and that's the middle C, okay? And this line is called a ledger line, and that's used when we don't have, you know, like the note is not included within the staff, and we just need extra. And if you can also see here, we have these extra lines, right? So for treble clef, the note that we know that's on this highest line is F, but then we can keep going, and then we'll go to G, and then keep going, go to A, B, C, D. So we have to start using these little lines called ledger lines. Okay, so to define it, a ledger line is an extra small part of a line above or below the staff. And this way we can continue using lines and spaces above or below the staff. Okay, so that's very important. Now, moving on. The grand staff. This is just a just to show you that, hey, here is how we would notate it, and then here is the notes that correspond to those notes that have been notated. Okay, so right in the middle C, that's this, and then from here, if we go up, C, go up, it will be D, and then E, F, G, A, and you can keep going. And from the middle C, if you go down, it's gonna be B, A, G, F, E, D, C, and then you can keep going down. And then those correspond to here, the middle C, and then D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and the same thing for the lower part. Okay, but we're not done yet. We still have another clef, and this clef is this really very cool looking clef that's right there. This is called the C clef, and for this one, it will actually be easier to read because you don't really have to remember the mnemonic devices, and I'll explain why. So this clef is used by instruments that have more of a middle range, like the viola. Okay, there are a lot of viola jokes that I might share with you, or I might not, because some are kind of offensive. But yeah, viola is this string instrument that is known for being right in the middle of the range. And like the violin always gets these really showy passages, and they're like the virtuosos of the orchestra, they get the hardest part. And then the cellos also have the super beautiful tone that people say that the cello has such a beautiful range because it resembles the range of a human voice. So there's that. But then the viola section is often kind of ignored. People think like, they're just fillers, which is not true. The viola is an extremely beautiful instrument. But yeah, I think there is a reason why there are all those jokes. Anyways, this is the C clef, and viola would definitely be using this clef. So the C clef, there are two kinds of C clef. There's the alto clef, and there is the tenor clef. But you don't really have to worry about the terms that much. It's very helpful to know. But what you have to know mainly is where the clef has its middle point, which is right here for the alto clef, and right here for the tenor clef. That's this place, right? That's where you will have the C, and not just any kind of C, but the middle C. Okay, so if you see a note here next to an alto clef, just know that that's middle C. And how do we know the rest of the notes? Well, you you can count, right? So from C, go to the next note, that's D, and E, and F. Let me just write it. And same way, if you go down, C, this would be B, A, and then G. Yeah, and then the same thing for the tenor clef. So you just have to know where the middle C is, and then you can just, write out all of the other notes. Okay, so that's the C clef. Well, here's another slide that shows you where the middle C is, which is basically what I already explained. All right, so here is the alto clef, and this is just to show you where the notes are. But it's basically something you can just take a look at and see how it corresponds to the keyboard. And same thing with the tenor clef. But mainly, you just need to know where the middle C's are. Okay, so just as a quick recap, you really have to know this for this week's assignment. That's the three main clefs. We have the treble clef or G clef, we have the bass clef or F clef, and then we have the C clefs, which are the alto clef and the tenor clef. Oh, I'm sorry, there is a little typo here. Okay, so for the treble clef, remember the mnemonic device for line notes in treble clef. That's going to be every good boy does fine, E.G. B D F, and for the space notes, it will be F A C E face. And for bass clef, it will be line notes, great big dog fights animals, and then for the space notes, it's all cows eat grass. Okay, so hopefully that helps, and we'll move on. So here's a little funny meme or comic, whatever you want to call it. So this is basically at the staff meeting, and then you have the treble clef and the bass clef arguing with each other, and there are all these little notes that are, on the side. I will leave it up to you to interpret what it means, but I thought it was kind of funny. Okay, so next we have to talk about accidentals. Accidentals are basically when you're writing in all of these notes on the staff, but then you need to kind of modify them. Okay? So before we talk about accidentals in detail, let's talk about half step and whole step. So I think the easiest way to understand the difference between half step and whole step is to use a piano keyboard. So let me see if I can show you the piano keyboard. Okay, here we go. So here's a piano keyboard. A half step is basically the distance between two adjacent keys. So if I play a note here, C, and then you take the next note next to it, to the right, that would be called a half step. Okay, so if you take any note, like if you take this note right here, and then you go up a half step, that would mean go into this note. Okay, so that's half step. A whole step is when you have two half steps, let's just say. So if you start from C, you count up two, or count to the right. 1, 2. So the distance between these two notes are going to be a whole step. Or coming from the middle C again, C4, if you go down two half steps, so one half step, two half steps, the distance between these two notes, C and this one, is going to be called a whole step. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. All right, so I'm going to skip over because I explained with the keyboard, so I think that's clear, half step and whole step. And now we can talk about accidentals. Okay, so on the piano, we already learned, there's the middle C, and then you can go to the next note, that's D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then it goes on, right? But we have not talked about the black keys yet. And that's when the accidentals come in. So in piano, we only have these 7 letters. But what about the black keys? We can't ignore them. Okay, so there are 5 kinds of accidentals. And we have the sharp, the flat, the natural. Okay, sharp, flat. Oh, sorry, this is gonna make it kind of hard to see. Sharp, flat, natural, double sharp, and double flat. Okay, so let's see how these work. So first, a sharp means that you will go up 1/2 step. So on the piano, one thing you have to really remember is that when you say go up, that's actually towards the right. Yeah, move 1 key to the right. And if a note goes down, that means you move 1 key to the left. Oh, sorry, there's another little typo, but I think you will forgive me. Okay, so if we take a note, let's just take the C. All right, we have C. So if we move up 1/2 step, that means from C we're gonna go to this note. Okay, the black key that's next to the C. That's 1/2 step up. If you go up 1/2 step, we can use the same letter C and then put a sharp sign next to it, a C sharp. That's what we will call that note. So we have a C and then a C sharp. Da da. Okay. If you play this very slowly, sounds kind of creepy. But there's also this tune that I'm sure you've heard before. And it begins with these half steps. Da, 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 da. Okay, so that's basically the best example of a half step. And then from C, same note, if we move down 1 step, well, actually, let's pick another note just so that it's not confusing for you. Let's pick G. Okay, so from G, if we move down 1 note, we'll get the G flat. Okay, and if we move up 1 note, we'll get a G sharp. So basically, it just depends on where you're coming from, so to name those black keys. And as you can see here, the black keys can all have 2 different ways to be named. So this same black key right here, if we're coming from C, it will be called a C sharp. But if we're coming from D, it will be called a D flat. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. And now we'll talk about something called enharmonic equivalents. And that's the same thing we just talked about, which is how can you name the same note a different way? All right. So for example, like the C sharp that we just talked about, like this key right here, if we're coming from C, because we're going higher, we're going up 1/2 step, we call it a C sharp. But then when we're coming from D, it's actually coming down, right, to the black key. So we call it a D flat. But a C sharp and a D flat, they are the same thing. They are still written differently, okay, when you're notating them. But when you hear the sound itself, it's the same sound that you hear. For example, let me just play it on the piano. This is C. From C, if we go up a 1/2 step, we get C sharp. And then from D, this is a D. If it comes down a 1/2 step, we get the D flat. Da da, and then da da. At the end, that's the same note. Okay? So if we say, hey, what's the enharmonic equivalent of a C sharp? Then if you look at the piano, you can tell it's a C sharp, it's also a D flat. So that's enharmonic equivalent. And here's one other interesting thing, which is the white keys can also have enharmonic equivalents. So for example, if you take a look at this note here, F, right? So F could be just F, but it could also be called E sharp, because if we come from E and we just go up 1/2 step, that's an E sharp, but you hear the same sound. So that's something a lot of people get confused about, which is they think those sharp and flat are only used for the black keys, which is not true because you can use them for the white keys as well. Okay, so that's the enharmonic equivalent. And as a definition, there's more than one way to name a note, and we call them enharmonic equivalents. Okay. Now, double sharps and flats. Okay, don't get scared by this because it's actually very, very simple. So, when you know that a sharp means you move up a half step, and a flat means you move down a half step. A double sharp, which actually is written as this little X. Okay, this is very important. I'm gonna put multiple stars here so that you don't get confused. So this is a double sharp, and then a double flat is basically just two flats. Okay, so make sure that you remember how to write these: a double sharp and double flat. A double sharp just means, hey, you go up one half step and you go up one more half step. Okay, double flat means the same thing. You take one note, you go down one half step, and just add another half step. So let's take this note as an example. Okay, actually, why don't we circle this one? So we're gonna look at the note G. Okay, the note G. So this same note G could also be named a different way if we are, say, if we want to name it in terms of F. From F, it has to go up one half step, another half step, so two half steps, right? So a G would be equivalent to an F double sharp. Hence the name here, F double sharp. And G, same thing, exact same thing. Okay, or this G could also be named in terms of A. So coming from A, in order for A to get to G, it has to come down one half step, another half step, right? And that's when you will get an A double flat. So basically, if you play this note on the piano, this is G, and coming from F, F sharp, F double sharp, G, F double sharp. It sounds the same, okay? And then for naming G in terms of A, we come from A, one half step down, A flat, another half step down, A double flat, G, A double flat. They sound the same thing, okay? So why don't we actually go to the piano layout so that you can see it a little more clearly, because this looks a little confusing. Okay, so let's go to that. My piano. Okay, so just very quickly, if we take the note D, this is D, okay? We have C, C going to D, okay? From D. This D can also be named in terms of C. So we're coming from C. From here, C, C sharp, C double sharp. Okay, so from D, if we're in D, and then if we come from E instead, from E, one half step down, E flat, another half step down, E double flat. So this same note D could be named as C double sharp or E double flat. Okay, D, C double sharp, E double flat. So you just have to know how to count, and you get it. All right, let's go back. Now, the last sign that we need to learn is called the natural sign. A natural sign cancels the effects of all other accidentals. So this is really, really important because when you're notating music, right? For example, you put a lot of these like sharps and flats on a note, and if you want to go back to the note without those sharps or flats, then you put a sign that looks like this. And it's basically like an L and a 7 put together. Okay, that's a natural sign. And it naturalizes the note. Alright, so that's it for today. I will also go over some of the assignments with you together. And yeah, I'll see you soon.